Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Stalin, and our today's video is gonna be related to some confusing verbs in English, and it's gonna be kind of verbs that we got mixed up with the meaning. So I'm gonna explain the meaning of the verbs and with some good examples. And if you guys like my videos, please make sure to subscribe my channel, share it with your friends, and let's get started with our today's video. So first verb that we're gonna do today is the difference between say versus tell. Say we use when we want to focus on the words someone spoke. For example, he said hello to me. And whereas tell means focus on giving information to someone. For example, he told me a story. So in the tell, it's someone is giving me information, and in the say, it's about focusing on words someone said. And the next pair of verb is speak versus talk. Speak we use for more formal and one way, in which it's not like a second person in the conversation that is talking, it's just like one person is saying something. For example, the manager spoke to the team. And for the talk is like a more casual way, and usually it's a two-way when two people are communicating. For example, we talked about the movie. And our third pair for verbs today is know versus understand. Know meaning having information about anything. For example, I know his name. Understand means comprehend the meaning, that you understand the meaning of that thing or the word. For example, I understand what you mean. And our next pair of verbs is learn versus study. Study is the process. For example, I study English every day. That is the process that you do. For example, I study science every day. That is the process. And whereas learn is the result. For example, I learned 10 new words today. Or I learned a poem today. So this is the difference between learn and study. And the next pair of verb is remember versus remind. Remember we use when we do something by ourselves. You do it yourself. For example, I remembered her birthday. Whereas remind is when someone helps us with something. For example, can you remind me to call her? Or can you remind me to book an appointment? Something like that. So this is the difference in remember and remind. Remember is something that we do it ourselves, and remind is when someone helps us to remember something. And the next pair of verb is affect versus effect. Affect is the form of verb we use for the influence. For example, the weather can affect your mood. Whereas effect is we can use as a noun or as a rare verb as well. That is which cause something. For example, the new CEO affected major changes. Or, for example, the growth of the population affected so much on the economy. So this is the difference between affect and effect. And the next pair of verb is lie versus lay. Lie is used without any object, which means is to rest. For example, I need to lie down. In there is no any object. Whereas in the lay, that needs an object, which means is to place something. For example, lay the book on the table. So, as you can see that in the lay there is a object, which is a book. But whereas in lie, there is no object needed in the sentence. And the next pair of verb is raise versus rise. Raise, in that we need the object, because raise is something that you lift. For example, she raised her hand. In here we have the object, which is hand. Whereas in the rise, there is no object. That is something lifts itself. For example, the sun rises at 6 a.m. And the next pair of verb is say versus state. Say is more like informal and spoken. For example, he said he was tired. Whereas state is something that is formal. Mostly it is used for written or the official statement. For example, he stated his opinion clearly. And the next pair of verb is hear versus listen. Hear is most of kind of a passive sense where we don't try. For example, I heard a noise. Whereas listen is like an active where we try to understand something or listen something. For example, I'm listening to music. And the next pair of verb is borrow versus lend. Borrow is to take something temporarily. For example, can I borrow your pen? Whereas lend is to give something temporarily. I lent him my pen. And the next pair of verb is accept versus accept. Accept is to receive or agree. For example, she accepted the invitation. Whereas accept is the verb to leave out or exclude. For example, they were all invited except John. And the next pair of verb is oversee versus overlook. Oversee means to manage or supervise. For example, she oversees the marketing team. And whereas the overlook, that is to miss something or ignore something. For example, I overlooked a big mistake in the report. And the next pair of the verb is sit versus set. Sit is to rest, in which there is no object needed. For example, please sit down. Whereas set, that is to place something which needs object. Set the plates on the table. And the next pair of the verb is prevent versus avoid. Prevent means stop something from happening. For example, vaccines prevent disease. Whereas avoid, that is stay away from something. For example, I avoid unhealthy food. And our next pair of verb is speak versus address. Speak is to talk, more general. For example, he spoke about climate change. Whereas address, that is to formally speak to a group or a problem. For example, she addressed the issue of corruption. And our next pair of verb is appear versus seem. Appear means focuses on physical presence or perception, in which mainly we just look for the physical appearance. For example, he appeared tired. Whereas seem we use for about, impression, or opinion. She seems very happy today. That is an impression. Or she seems sad today. That is also an impression. In these kind of scenarios, we cannot use appear. Because if you're going to use appear, it's going to be wrong. So these are the pairs of verb that we're going to do today. Try to practice as much as you can. Try to make sentences so that you can understand the meaning, where you can use which verb and where it's correct. Write it down in the comment, and hope you guys liked today's video. Make sure to subscribe my channel and do like, do comments, share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching.